In Part 1, Beautiful Byways explored the northern half of North Carolina's Outer Banks. From the Currituck Beach Lighthouse and Wright Brothers National Memorial to the Elizabethan Gardens, there's a lot more to this coastal paradise than just pretty beaches. In Part 2, our road trip continues into the more remote and most beautiful part of the Outer Banks, where more lighthouses, shipwrecks, and shelling set the scene. Continuing south on Highway 12, the road enters Cape Hatteras National Seashore, and soon, Lighthouse number 3 appears. This is also the third Bodie Island lighthouse. The first was built in 1847 but abandoned because of a poor foundation. The second went up in 1859 but was blown up 2 years later by fleeing Confederate troops during the Civil War. The current Bodie Island lighthouse was constructed in 1872 and stands 150 feet high. Moving forward, the Outer Banks Scenic Byway gets less busy and the beach is more secluded. The Atlantic side of the Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge features sand, surf, and the Boiler Wreck about 100 yards offshore. For some 160 years, the tanker steam engine has been sticking out of the water. On the other side of Highway 12, a nature trail leads into the marsh. The Outer Banks are an archipelago of low-lying barrier islands. Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge was established in 1938 to primarily protect loggerhead sea turtles and the 370-plus species of birds you might see. This is obviously a desirable place for a home base, and the Oregon Inlet Campground is conveniently close by. Just remember to reserve a site as soon as you firm up plans. With sand dunes lining the route and small towns named Rodanthe, Waves, and Avon along the way, it's 45 minutes to Cape Hatteras and its lighthouse, the most famous of the 5 we'll see. Called America's Lighthouse, it sits strategically at a point where dangerous, shifting underwater sandbars, named the Diamond Shoals, extend almost 20 miles into the sea. At 198 feet, the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse is also the tallest brick lighthouse in the country. This particular structure dates back to 1870. In 1999, it was moved on railroad tracks a half-mile inland because of the encroaching Atlantic Ocean. The beach at Cape Hatteras is continually recognized as one of the most beautiful in America. It's an excellent place to shell and fish. Keep in mind that anyone older than 16 will need a coastal recreational fishing license, which costs $30 for out-of-state visitors and $15 for North Carolina residents. Pier and charter boat fishing are covered by a blanket license, so you won't need an individual one. Though it might be hard to imagine with all the modern development, Hatteras Island is steeped in Civil War history. The Union won its first battle here, and the island was home to North Carolina's first safe haven for African Americans, the Hotel des Afriques. And remember the Diamond Shoals, that massive shifting sandbar the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse warns against? It's one of the reasons the Outer Banks is murder on mariners, with more than 2,000 shipwrecks. This so-called graveyard of the Atlantic has its own museum, displaying salvaged items from wrecks like the USS Monitor, a high-tech battleship at the time that sank in an 1862 storm. And who could forget Chipwreck, when thousands of Doritos bags washed ashore after 4 containers were lost from a cargo ship during a 2006 storm. Cape Hatteras is the end of the road, but the Outer Banks Scenic Byway and State Highway 12 don't stop here. A free vehicle ferry makes several runs a day to Ocracoke Island. It's first come, first serve, no reservations taken, so plan accordingly. The hour-long sailing passes through the Pamlico Sound. Lying entirely west of the Outer Banks, it's the largest saltwater lagoon on the east coast. Ocracoke can only be reached by boat or plane, but Highway 12 still gets you where you need to go once you reach the island. Sand dunes line the road's ocean side, forming a protective backdrop at Ocracoke Campground. Like Oregon Inlet, this campground is part of Cape Hatteras National Seashore and run by the National Park Service. Ocracoke is just 16 miles long and varies from 3 to less than a half-mile wide. The eastern side is pretty much entirely beach. But there are woods here too, and the Hammock Hills Nature Trail is a short hike that feels more like Appalachia in western North Carolina. Until you get to the marsh. Highway 12 reaches the end of the island at the village of Ocracoke, quite possibly the most attractive of all Outer Banks towns, where seafood, sweets, art, and a kite shop are big draws. But the most popular tourist attraction is the fifth and final lighthouse of our road trip, and at just 75 feet high, it's also the second smallest. The Ocracoke Lighthouse is North Carolina's oldest and the USA's second oldest operating lighthouse. It's been here 200 years. Now fully automated, there's no keeper per se. Today, it's run by the US Coast Guard, and unlike the other lighthouses, you can't climb it. Another ferry takes us away from Ocracoke and the Outer Banks toward mainland North Carolina. This route has fewer sailings than our earlier ride. It's also longer, almost 2.5 hours, and you must make reservations. This ferry isn't free either, but like our previous boat, it carries vehicles of all sizes, including RVs. Coming soon, there's much more to explore along North Carolina's southeastern coast as our ferry makes land and beautiful byways rolls on.